Welcome to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, powered by InsideTexas.com. It's a Saturday Roundtable. I'm Joe Cook, got Ian Boyd, got Coach Dub with me. We are going to talk about Brent Venables, Oklahoma head coach, getting a new contract extension on Friday. We will also discuss some Heisman candidates that On3 came out with. But if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on podcast, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. Give us a rating as well. We appreciate it so much. Head to InsideTexas.com. Use the promo code IT1. Get yourself 2 months of Inside Texas access for just $1. And Coach, I'm going to throw this to you. When you think about recruiting and you think about on the trail and things like that, how much does a contract matter for some of the recruits that you, in your experience, talk to?
The biggest thing is, you got some stability, right? Players and parents may believe, okay, this coach is going to be here for a while. He's not going anywhere. And that's the kind of pitch they can use, right? Sometimes schools can negative recruit you. Say, hey, that coach is going to get fired. He's going to be gone in a couple of years. You never know. It may keep him and his staff around. Depends on how they kind of divvy up the money. You never know. So it's good to hear, he may be around, but still, contracts have buyouts for a reason too. So you never know.
So where I'm going with this, and as you can see on the bottom of the screen, is that Oklahoma agreed to a 6-year contract extension with Brent Venables. It takes him through the 2029 season, keeps him pretty close to the same rate, the same salary he was making, kind of in the upper $7 million range. His original contract was fully guaranteed. At the time of recording, have not been able to see if that's continues to be the case, but can only assume that it is. Ian, in light of looking back to a couple months ago and seeing Sark extended through 2030, now today we see Brent Venables extended through 2029. What are some of your initial thoughts on the Sooners locking up their head coach for at least half a decade or more?
It's a pretty interesting move, right? Just the timing of it. After 2 years, one of which was not good, before the SEC move, so before you see his teams perform on the stage that's going to matter for the contract, and right after spring and before fall camp, in the middle of the summer, right? To me, all this says that Oklahoma wanted to maintain stability and protect themselves from any kind of knee-jerk reactions in the event of a bad 2024. And Venables was entirely willing to sign it. He could always try to renegotiate if they have a great year in 2024, and certainly if they have their big breakthrough in 2025 when Jackson Arnold is a junior. But everybody was very willing to get this done now. And I think that tells you that they want just the stability. They're not afraid of being committed to him for at least a few more years. And they wanted to have that done and settled before the season, which to me speaks to not a lot of confidence in the 2024 Sooners, but maybe honestly a moderate amount. They seem comfortable with Venables himself, right? Like Texas probably would have waited before they locked up their guy like that. They definitely waited with Sark. And Oklahoma, they know the big power brokers at Oklahoma can remember the 90s. A huge chunk of their fans cannot, but a lot of the older guys and the power brokers, they can. And they remember what instability at Oklahoma looks like, and they want nothing to do with it. So Venables is our guy for the foreseeable future. It seems to be the message.
So looking at some of the numbers, and this is from our friend George Stoya over at Sooner Scoop, Venables will be paid $7.2 million in this upcoming season, and will get a raise to about $7.63 million in 2025. $7.2 million, according to George, is 8th in the SEC among head coaches. And I know that you can brag about the amount of money that your head coach is making, but Ian, do you think that speaks a little bit to the situation and maybe belief, or do you take anything from that 7.2 million number?
No, I mean, they didn't reward him as though he had just won the Big 12, that's for sure. This is basically just to me, this looks like we like where we're at. We want to be very clear about where we're at before the next season happens, right? So it's like, I know George was noting like, hey, he doesn't get paid that much. This is not like a Jimbo Fisher deal. But it's not like they gave him a huge raise either. So this wasn't just like keeping up with the Joneses. To me, this is just trying to communicate stability as strongly as possible before, what could be like 6-6 or 7-5 or something like that.
I haven't looked at their win total in a little bit, but it's not up there. I think it's 7.5 or maybe lower than that, right?
Yeah, 7.5. Yeah. Everybody watch the deep dive that we put up the other day and we talk about it.
Good video to check out. Coach, when you think about the recruiting trail and you think about the idea that as it relates to Texas, which is where all this centers on, it's that Steve Sarkisian, at least through 2030, is going to be battling on the field, but also on the trail with Brent Venables. What does that do when you're out there, when you're, competing, let's say, for Michael Fasusi, who's taking his official visit to Texas this weekend? He's visited Oklahoma. Oklahoma's interested in him with Bill Bedenbaugh. He's visiting Texas right now. Texas wants him with Kyle Flood. How does this type of thing affect those types of recruitments or any recruitment on the trail at all?
Yeah, I mean, they compete on the field. They compete on every single sport. Like, it's a big rivalry, right? So now you got two head coaches going to be here for a while. They'll be just continue to battle. I think it does. You get those kids who say, "Hey, I can go to OU because I know this coach is going to be here," or I can go to Texas because I know Sarkisian's going to be here. But they're just going to, when you come down to weighing schools and choosing an option, now you got to like say, "Hey, someone takes you back to Mac Brown and Bob Stoops, right? Like they were battling for a while, and it's going to be sort of similar, the exact same thing, but now you got some confidence going into the SEC, knowing who my coach is going to be if I choose to go to Oklahoma or if I choose to go to Texas. I think it just continues and intensifies the rivalry, gives fans more to talk about, gives more people things to talk about on a recruiting trail and use that against each other. Like, hey, I beat this guy this many times. You need to come up here, up north, or, I've beaten, Venables this many times. You need to come to Texas. So you got that. You can use that to your advantage. But it's going to be interesting to see.
I'm glad you mentioned Mac Brown and Bob Stoops because from 1999 to 2013, that's a long time of battling. And Brown and Stoops battled on the trail, on the field, in all different places. Basically, when Mac Brown retired, yeah, Bob Stoops was there for 3 more years or so. But there's been, I don't want to say instability because Oklahoma was still a playoff program and Texas was going through its little bit of a journey in the desert. But in 2013, 2014 shows up, and then Charlie Strong is there for 3 years. Then Bob Stoops retires, and Tom Herman shows up. Lincoln Riley shows up. They battle. Now they're both gone. Tom Herman, obviously at FAU, Lincoln Riley left for USC. Now, Ian, it seems like this brings a little bit of stability to at least the head coaching position that this rivalry, when it's been at its peak, especially when it was at its non-conference peak, had when you had Royal, when you had Switzer, when you had all those different guys. Now that there's that type of stability that sets up for battles on the field between Sark and Venables for at least, assuming till the 2029 season.
Definitely the next 2 years, I think. If Texas goes and beats the pants off Oklahoma the next 2 years in the Red River Shootout, then there will be no additional extensions and Oklahoma will find the buyout money, So, yeah, there's a little bit of stability right now, but I don't know. It kind of depends on how that game goes, right? Like Herman versus Riley kind of looked like it might be a really good matchup for years to come. Herman gave him all he wanted in 2017. Beat him in 2018, lost in the Big 12 championship game. But then Riley made a big change at defensive coordinator and just ran away with that series, right? So you never know. Like sometimes it could be like this, and then the series tends to be kind of streaky. Like one team can dominate for a while. So maybe I don't. I'm not ready to say that it's going to be Stoops versus Mac just yet.
Well, I mean, people have to hope that Texas under Sark fares better than Mac did. And Mac had some good wins, but he had some atrocious losses, as we can remember. And maybe there's one I don't remember. But, thinking about Steve Sarkisian, you have to look at his record too. Granted, his first year in 2021 was against Lincoln Riley. Heartbreaking loss to the Sooners. 49-0, something worth celebrating, something that was a lot of fun. But then you come back the next year. It's the lone regular season blemish on your road to the Big 12 championship. Steve Sarkisian's 1-2 against Oklahoma. And I think that you can look at all the different accomplishments that he has put together in these past 3 years, coming from 5-7 to 12-2, Big 12 championship. But I think a lot of people want to see Sark beat Oklahoma. Winning your rivalry games is important. I know so much about college football has changed between, realignment. This is going to be an SEC game where for decades it was a non-conference game. This is going to be a game that still holds a lot of weight within the national college football environment. It could end up being, maybe down the road, another rematch in the SEC title game. And Ian, I know you're probably skeptical of that, but it still matters for Sarkisian and for Texas to win this game. And I feel like that's kind of stating the obvious, but even, making the playoff, winning the Big 12, you still want to beat your rivals. And now Texas knows, and conversely, Oklahoma knows that the person that it's going to take to go through to beat that rival will be on those sidelines for a good while. Coach, Ian, any other parting thoughts before we move on to something a little more Texas-centric?
I will just note that the rematches that are likely to occur in the future would probably be in the playoffs, more so than the SEC championship game. So just imagine how that game changes if you get a rematch in the playoffs with a national champ. That'll be it's going to happen eventually, and it's going to be pretty fun.
And think of this. Think if that's a home game. This is a series that's not been a home game for over a century. And so think of if Texas had to go to Gaylord Family Memorial Stadium. Think of if Oklahoma had to come to Austin. There's a lot of drawbacks to the 12-team playoff, but that would be a positive. That'd be fun to see. Another positive that we have to talk about, have to give some thanks to, is our sponsor, and that's Laura Baker. Laura Baker, if you are looking for a home in the Central Texas area, you need to call her at 512-784-0505, an elite member of the Andy Allen team. And Ian, as we can see by those boxes there in your background, Laura Baker helped you get back to the Austin area as well.
Yeah, I just saw her the other day. Breaking down, we love the home. Area has been great, everything we hoped for. And I mean, there's a lot of options in the Austin area. It's kind of a good time to be buying, frankly, especially if you're moving from Michigan or somewhere where there's not as much housing. You'll be shocked by what you can find in Austin. And man, it was so helpful to have Laura just to zero in on where exactly we wanted to be for our family, to be near the places that matter to us, and couldn't be happier with how it's gone.
If Ian attests to Laura Baker, then you should too. Again, call her at 512-784-0505. As we move away from Oklahoma and into something a little bit more Texas-centric, On Three's Jesse Simonton, national college football columnist, has been releasing top Heisman candidates for each conference. Quinn Ewers is number 2 among the SEC. On Friday, he released his top Heisman Trophy candidates. And gentlemen, as you can see, he's also number 2 in the nation. A lot of different things to look at here. You see Carson Beck being number 1, Dylan Gabriel 3, Jalen Milroe 4, Jackson Dart 5, Cam Ward 6, Riley Leonard 7, Nico Yamaliva 8, I think I got that right, Ohio State's Will Howard at 9, and Noah Fafita at 10. All quarterbacks. Coach, aside from Ewers at 2, right behind a player he's going to match up with in Carson Beck, anything else that kind of stands out to you about this top 10 list?
I mean, I'm surprised. You got Nico on there, which we know he's young. He'll be a good quarterback at Tennessee in the system they run. I'll say number 9, Will Howard. I didn't see that one coming, honestly, but hey, I mean, if he believes he's a Heisman contender, then maybe he does good things at Ohio State. We'll see. But other than that, I mean, Quinn being number 2, behind Carson Beck, it's not bad. I mean, look, everybody has their own system. It depends on who's going to lead their team the best throughout the season, make the most spectacular plays. And I think Quinn has the ability to kind of set himself above everybody else. You got week 2 versus Michigan, then you play Georgia, right? You do good in both of those games, then you go on to beat Oklahoma. Like, you're going to put yourself in good position to win the Heisman. So I have to look at everybody else's schedule to kind of see who they face and how many marquee games they really have to make a stamp on the season to win the Heisman.
What do you think about it being all quarterbacks, Coach? I know that the last non-quarterback to win it was Devonta Smith in 2020. He had a Heisman finalist at quarterback, and Mac Jones. Only since 2009, and including 2009, there have only been 3 non-quarterback winners. They've all gone to Alabama. 2 were running backs, and Mark Ingram and Derrick Henry, and then of course Smith. What do you think about the fact that it's just all quarterbacks here on this list?
I think it just means, like, like you just said, like, most of the time quarterback wins the Heisman. Like, we haven't seen it. I don't even remember the last defensive player who won, what, Charles Wilson maybe? Like, it's been so quarterbacks usually wins this award, right? They win the Maxwell, then they win the Heisman. So I think he's basing it just on that, assuming that quarterbacks are going to win. So he probably made the list based on that alone, because non-quarterbacks traditionally just don't win the Heisman unless they just have some miraculous season like, Smith had when he was at Alabama. But yeah, or some running back just has a spectacular season as well, which everybody wants to throw the ball versus running now. So I think the quarterback is one that everybody's going to look at. They're going to be the favorites throughout the season. So I think they just made his list based off that, and I can kind of understand why.
Ian, if you go to FanDuel and look at the odds-on favorites, this matches the top 3. Beck, Ewers, Gabriel are the top 3 there. Then it kind of varies, and some of the guys that you won't see on this list that's on our screen and I listed through are on FanDuel, like Garrett Nussmeier, Avery Johnson, Connor Weigman, Jackson Arnold, Jalen Daniels. Those are guys who are, I think, closer within the top 10 on FanDuel than these guys. So I know this isn't a betting odds list. This is a contenders list. But what are your thoughts just kind of looking through here? To me, it's a lot of different quarterbacks on good teams and high-powered offenses that can create stats and maybe win a lot of games. And we know that's a prerequisite for the Heisman. But what are you seeing when you're looking at this list? And then what are you seeing when it comes to Quinn's candidacy?
You need the narrative, the team narrative to win the Heisman. And then for that, you need the marquee games and then the marquee performances. So it invariably goes to the quarterback, because usually nobody sums up a team better than a quarterback. Like, if you have a team that wins with defense and run game, it's not common for them to have a single guy anymore that can sum up the team's identity in the same way that a quarterback can for a potent offense. So I kind of like the whoever wins the Big 12 championship and gets that 4 seed in the playoffs, their quarterback's going to have a case, right? Especially if he has big stats and big games. For differentiating, though, especially with guys on big time teams like Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck, I'm looking at who are their receivers. Because almost always in college football, the guy that wins the Heisman Trophy and the guy that wins the national championship is just the guy that had a bunch of NFL receivers. There's very little correlation between that success and then NFL success, where it's more on the quarterback. It's just, who was thrown to Malik Neighbors, who was thrown to Devonta Smith. A rare moment of clarity when Devonta Smith won that instead of Mac Jones, right? Who was thrown to whoever. So I feel like Quinn Ewers is a good bet because he has Isaiah Bond, he has Jonte Cook, he has Silas Bolden, he has all these. Who am I missing? Ryan Wingo could explode.
Wingo and Golden.
Golden, yeah. There's all these guys that could be very good. Whereas Carson Beck, they had to bring in Colby Young. I don't know, Coach, if you've seen him play or have any insights on him. I don't know him very well, but I know that Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers were extremely good college football players. And I don't doubt that Beck is good and that he'll make good use of whoever is at receiver for them. But that is such a big – I think people are underestimating how big of a change that's going to be if they're not extremely good at receiver again. And one quick note on Dylan Gabriel. He has to go to Camp Randall in Ann Arbor in November. And he's a little guy, and he did not look comfortable in Kansas last year, playing in the cold and wet, a little dinged up. I have mega doubts about Dylan Gabriel playing in the Pacific Northwest and playing in those cold weather outdoor stadiums in November. So that's like my biggest question with Oregon this season.
Kind of ties into our first topic about how he went to Kansas and on an Oklahoma team that went to Kansas with a chance at playing in the Big 12 championship, and Jason Bean and the Jayhawks undid those efforts. So, I'm really curious to see how this goes, because with Texas, I've been around covering this team full time since 2016. I saw them try to dip their toe in the water with Deontay Foreman on a Heisman campaign. But a 5-7 season can undo that pretty quickly. Saw them try with Sam Ehlinger in 2020 ahead of his senior year. Just things unraveled. Too much was going on outside of football for those campaigns to really take off. Bijan in 2022, it got some traction, but I think when you're competing against the dynamo that was Caleb Williams, people appreciated Bijan, but at the same time, you're on an 8-4 football team. Like you mentioned, all these teams, maybe with the exception of, and even so, Arizona is thought to be really good this year, especially in the new Big 12. Like, all these teams have extremely high aspirations: Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Alabama, Ole Miss, Miami, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Ohio State, and more than anybody, probably Arizona. Like, all these teams have high aspirations. So Quinn, maybe more so than Sam Ehlinger on an imperfect Texas team, and Bijan on an 8-4 Texas team, heading into the season, a team that was 5-7 the year before. He's probably got the right wave to ride into Heisman candidacy, the best one maybe since Colt McCoy had in 2009, and then before then Vince, and then Ricky, the last successful one. So, Coach Ian, any parting thoughts on the Heisman before we stiff arm this topic and get out of here?
How about that Georgia Texas game as a potential kingmaker?
Well, I think we know for sure that there's going to be a ton of not only national media, the big wigs from the big outlets, but also I bet 15, maybe 16 NFL front offices are going to send representation to that game. I remember Texans GM Nick Caserio, and grabbing off the floor, he was at the K-State game, probably watching Devondre Sweat and Byron Murphy go against Cooper Beebe. So if he was there for that, when you got Beck, Ewers, Bond, all the different guys on Georgia, a lot of them are in the trenches. All the different guys on Texas, a lot of them are at the skill positions, but also on the O-line. Like, that's going to be a what's it called? A narrative defining game, I feel like. In the winter, they're in mid-October. Again, we were talking about riding that wave. They're going to be the ones who have the best lasting impact on a lot of different people who probably have a vote for the Heisman, which I don't know about y'all too, but I don't have one, and I'm okay with that. So, gentlemen, thank y'all so much for joining me on this Saturday. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you like it, subscribe to our channel. It's an official visit weekend, so we're going to have a ton of official visit content, not just here on the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, but also on Inside Texas. And if you want all that information, head to InsideTexas.com. Use the promo code IT1. Get you 2 months of access for just $1. If you do that, you'll be getting practice reports, scrimmage info, a bunch of different stuff right as the team is getting ready to kick off in just about 70 days. So, Ian, Coach, thank you so much. Thank you to our sponsor, Laura Baker. We'll see you next time on the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, powered by InsideTexas.com.